For centuries, the western edge of the Iberian Peninsula was contested between Christian kingdoms and Muslim rulers during the Reconquista. By 1249, Portugal had secured the Algarve and established borders remarkably similar to those of modern Portugal. Unlike many European kingdoms still locked in continental wars, Portugal now faced outward toward the Atlantic Ocean. In 1415, the Portuguese captured the North African city of Ceuta. Although the conquest appeared to be another Christian-Muslim conflict, it marked the true beginning of the Portuguese overseas empire. From Ceuta, Portugal gained access to African trade networks and launched expeditions further down the African coast. One of the key figures behind this maritime expansion was Prince Henry the Navigator. Under his sponsorship, Portuguese sailors explored the Atlantic, discovering and colonizing islands such as the Madeira and the Azores. These expeditions slowly pushed beyond the known world of European maps. A major breakthrough came in 1434, when explorer Gil Innes successfully sailed around Cape Bojador, a point long feared by sailors. After that achievement, Portuguese ships advanced steadily along the coast of Africa, establishing forts and trading posts. As exploration continued, Lisbon became enriched through African trade. Gold, ivory, spices, and enslaved Africans began flowing into Portugal. Sadly, this period also marked the early growth of the transatlantic slave trade, which would devastate millions of lives over the next 4 centuries. By the 1460s, Portuguese navigators had reached the Gulf of Guinea, and they began marking territorial claims with stone monuments called padroes. Trading forts soon stretched across the African coastline. However, Portugal's ultimate goal was not Africa itself, it was Asia. European demand for spices such as pepper, cinnamon, and nutmeg was enormous, but these goods reached Europe through expensive overland routes controlled by Arab and Venetian merchants. Everything changed in 1488 when Bartholomew Diaz rounded the southern tip of Africa, proving that the Indian Ocean could be reached by sea. Soon after Diaz's voyage, Christopher Columbus reached the Americas while sailing for Spain. This created tension between Spain and Portugal over newly discovered territories. To avoid conflict, the two kingdoms signed the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494, dividing the non-European world into spheres of influence. Lands east of the line belonged to Portugal, while lands west belonged to Spain. This agreement would later explain why Brazil became Portuguese-speaking, while most of South America became Spanish-speaking. In 1497, Vasco da Gama departed Lisbon with 4 ships in search of a direct sea route to India. After a brutal 10-month journey around Africa, he arrived at Calicut in 1498. Although trade negotiations were difficult and profits initially disappointing, da Gama's voyage proved that Europe could directly access Asian markets by sea. This transformed global commerce forever. Soon afterward, Portuguese fleets expanded across the Indian Ocean, establishing trading posts in places such as Goa, Malacca, Macau, Nagasaki. Portugal created a vast maritime network connecting Europe, Africa, India, Southeast Asia, China, and Japan. In 1500, explorer Pedro Álvares Cabral accidentally landed on the coast of Brazil while sailing to India. Since the territory fell within Portugal's side of the Treaty of Tordesillas, it was claimed for the Portuguese crown. At first, Brazil was considered less valuable than Asian trade routes. But over time, sugar plantations transformed the colony into one of the empire's richest territories. The sugar industry relied heavily on enslaved African labor. Millions of Africans were forcibly transported to Brazil, making it one of the largest slave societies in history. Major Brazilian cities such as Salvador, São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro grew rapidly during the colonial period. During the late 16th and early 17th centuries, Portugal's dominance began to weaken. After Portugal entered the Iberian Union under Spanish rule in 1580, Portuguese colonies became targets for Spain's enemies. The Dutch and English entered the spice trade and attacked Portuguese positions across Asia and Africa during the Dutch-Portuguese War. Portugal lost several territories, including parts of Sri Lanka, Malacca, the Gold Coast in West Africa. Although Portugal retained Brazil, its Asian dominance steadily declined. In the late 17th century, gold and diamonds were discovered in Brazil's Minas Gerais region. This brought enormous wealth to Portugal and triggered a major migration boom. However, disaster struck in 1755 when a massive earthquake devastated Lisbon, killing tens of thousands of people. The catastrophe severely weakened Portugal economically and politically. At the same time, revolutionary ideas were spreading across the Atlantic world after the American Revolution, French Revolution. These movements inspired independence sentiments in Brazil. In 1807, Napoleon Bonaparte invaded Portugal. The Portuguese royal family fled to Rio de Janeiro, temporarily making Brazil the center of the empire. This dramatically increased Brazil's political importance. In 1822, Pedro I of Brazil declared Brazilian independence and established the Empire of Brazil. Losing Brazil was a devastating blow. Portugal's once vast empire was now reduced mainly to colonies in Africa and a few Asian outposts. By the late 19th century, European colonial competition in Africa intensified. Portugal attempted to connect its colonies of Angola and Mozambique through Central Africa via the Pink Map project, but United Kingdom blocked the plan. The empire weakened further during the 20th century. Following First World War, Second World War, anti-colonial movements spread across Africa and Asia. Portugal fought brutal colonial wars in Angola, Mozambique, Guinea-Bissau until the Carnation Revolution overthrew the dictatorship in Portugal. The new government rapidly granted independence to its colonies. The final remnant of the empire, Macau, was handed over to China in 1999, officially ending the Portuguese Empire after nearly 600 years. Despite its collapse, the legacy of the Portuguese Empire remains enormous. Portuguese is spoken by over 250 million people worldwide. It helped establish the first truly global maritime trade network. It connected Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Americas permanently. It played a major role in shaping modern globalization. Countries that still use Portuguese today include Brazil, Angola, Mozambique, Portugal. The shipping routes pioneered by Portuguese sailors more than 5 centuries ago remain central to global trade even today.